Learn 3 things you're saying yes to that keeps you in the expert trap and how to get out so you can be remembered, referred, and booked on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. Hi there and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. This is the 4th and final episode in the Expert Trap series that we've been doing this month. In the first episode, 478, I talked about what the expert trap is. It happens when your expertise becomes the place where you hide. It feels really good. It feels really comfortable. It feels really validating, but it ultimately doesn't help your audience get what they need, and it doesn't help you to propel yourself as a speaker and thought leader. Then in episode 479, I talked about the AI version of the expert trap and why AI can make things sound really polished, but it can't find your signature message for you. And then in the last episode, 480, you heard my conversation with one of our Thought Leader Academy graduates about what it can look like to move out of expert presenter mode and into a clearer thought leadership message. Today, I want to bring this to a practical level, but I also want to go a little bit deeper because the expert trap is not only a content problem. It's not just about what information you're including in your talks or what you're leaving out. It's also an identity problem, which makes it a bookability problem. And this is the part that matters for your speaking opportunities, your referrals, your visibility, and your business. When you stay in expert mode, people may like you, they trust you, they think you're really smart, and they tell you things like, wow, that was really valuable. But liking you and booking you are not the same thing because people book and refer the speaker they remember and they can easily describe. They need to be able to say, you need to hear her talk about this, not just she gave us a lot of good information. And you may realize that your talk needs a stronger point of view, that your audience doesn't need every single detail of what you know, and you probably want to be more than the person who just gives helpful tips. But then you sit down to work on your talk, or you get invited to speak, or you're working on the speaker proposal, and suddenly the safer version of you comes back. The version that says, let me make sure I sound credible. Let me include the extra content. Let me not make too strong of a claim. Let me keep this broad enough so everyone in the room feels included. And as I say often in these episodes, there is no judgment in this. I've done all of these things. I still have to watch for them. When I create a presentation, I have a mental checklist that I go through when I look at it and I make sure, am I in this presentation? Am I in this talk? Is my point of view in here? So in this episode, I'm going to share 3 things you may be saying yes to that keep you in the expert trap. The first is saying yes to more content. The second is saying yes to neutrality. And the third is saying yes to the wrong room. And for each one, I want us to look at the identity underneath it and what is that costing us? Because these choices look like speaking choices or content choices, but underneath they may be saying something about who you believe you are allowed to be when you're in the room or on the stage. And they may be the very reason people appreciate your talk, but don't remember, refer, or book you for the next one. If you would like to learn more about the type of speaker you are, what your natural communication strengths are, and where you can level up, take our free speaker archetype quiz. It just takes a couple of minutes. You can do that at speakingyourbrand.com/quiz. You'll get your results right away with my recommendations. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/quiz. Now, let's get on with the show. The first thing you may be saying yes to is more content. And this is the classic expert trap move. You have the framework, and then you add the definition. You have the 3 points, and then you think, well, there's actually a 4th point and maybe even a 5th point that they absolutely have to know. You have the client example, and then you add more case study information behind it. The event tells you that you have 25 minutes, and your instinct is to keep the 45-minute version and just talk faster. But please don't do any of this. And I say this with love because I know why we do it. When you know your topic really well, everything can feel equally important. And if you're someone who values substance, leaving things out can feel almost irresponsible. You're thinking to yourself, well, what if they need this? What if someone asks about it? What if they don't understand the nuance? What if the one person in the room who knows this field hears me leave something out and thinks I don't really know what I'm talking about? That's the sentence underneath a lot of this. What if they think I don't really know what I'm talking about? And this is the identity piece. It's the armor that we wear that we've gotten really used to wearing. It's a way of saying, if I include enough, no one can question whether I belong here. No one will think that I'm an imposter. Now, of course, sometimes the audience genuinely does need more context and does need that extra example. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes that research does belong in the talk. So this is not about making every presentation shorter or thinner. It's about knowing the difference between content that serves the audience and content that's trying to protect your identity as the expert. The more speaking I've done and the more coaching I've done over the past 10 years since I've started this business, I have really come to realize how much as a speaker, whether you're in a room of 30 people leading more of a workshop style, or you're on a stage delivering a keynote to hundreds or maybe even 1,000 people, that you are there to serve the audience, to truly understand where they're at, where they want to go, what's getting in their way, and how you can help them to think differently so that they can get there. As you're looking at your presentation or your talk, the question to ask is not, is this good content? Because it probably is. The question is, what job is this content doing? Is it helping the audience follow the journey to learn more about themselves? Or is it helping me feel safer because I've shown them how much I know? And those are very different things. Now, if you have taken our speaker archetype quiz and you know you're a stellar scholar, I'm right there with you. And this can be painful because we love good content. We love the research. We love the nuance. We love digging into the weeds, and we love being prepared. But your audience is not going to remember everything you know. They cannot. They cannot take your 10 or 20 or 30 years of expertise and experience and insights and download them into their minds in 20 minutes or even an hour. What they're going to remember is how you help them to see themselves, their work, or their problem differently. So here's the diagnostic question to ask yourself for this first yes. Where am I using more content to prove that I belong, to prove that I should be here? That's the identity question, not where can I randomly cut some slides or where can I get rid of half of my framework. Where are you using more content to prove that you belong? Because the thought leader version of you does not need to prove everything in the room. You need to lead the audience somewhere. And sometimes that means leaving good material out. Now, this is why I love having a podcast, because I have every single week where I can explore different ideas and different examples and different pieces of content. I don't have to pack it all into one 45-minute or 60-minute talk. So if you're like me, you may want to start a podcast. But for that time you have together with the audience, think about what is going to serve them the most. When your talk has too much content, people may leave feeling impressed. They may say, oh my gosh, my brain is so full, but they can't repeat it. And if they can't repeat it, they can't refer it. They can't say to a colleague, you need to bring her in because she helped us see this thing we hadn't seen before. This is why expertise alone doesn't get you booked. Expertise can make people trust you, but your point of view is what helps your idea travel afterwards. The second thing you may be saying yes to is neutrality. Now, I want to be very clear about this because I'm not saying that every talk has to be provocative or controversial. I don't think you need to create a hot take just to sound different. And as a podcaster, and there's lots of podcasters who basically make their living on hot takes. So I'm not saying that you should do that. And if you're listening to this podcast and you are a stellar scholar or you're a high achieving woman, that's probably not the direction you want to go to anyways, because the audience can feel when you're performing a point of view that you don't actually believe. What I mean by neutrality is that you may be keeping the talk in safer territory because taking a stand feels too exposed. And for a lot of women, this is where imposter syndrome comes in. This is one of the things that we talk about in our Thought Leader Academy group calls, because it's one thing to say in your presentations, audience, here are the best practices, because that's safe. Everyone else says the same thing because that's why they are best practices. It's another thing to say, here's what I believe people in my industry are getting wrong. That's where you're making a claim. That's where you're shifting from becoming just the helpful expert to become the person associated with a point of view. And this can feel very different, not only in your head, but also in your body. You maybe get the little bit of like that butterflies or kind of like that, just a little bit of like tingle in your body. And that's actually a good sign. That's a sign that you're going somewhere new and different. You're challenging yourself and you're challenging your audience. But oftentimes when we're feeling that sensation, we then want to pull back because we fear being seen as too opinionated. And this is understandable because we've been rewarded for being balanced, pleasant, smiling, generous, careful, prepared. We learned that if we could be the person who knew the material and didn't make anyone uncomfortable, we would be safe in the room. So when thought leadership asks us to say what we believe, something in us can push back. Let me give you an example. A client came in with a topic that could have easily become a solid training on communication best practices for leaders, and that would have been fine. People like communication best practices. You can make them practical, you can put them into a checklist or to a worksheet. But as we talked during our one-on-one VIP day, there was something stronger underneath it. Her real message was not simply, here are some ways to communicate better. The real message was that the way leaders communicate often reveals whether they actually trust the people they're leading. Now, that's an entirely different talk. That's not about how-to content, how to communicate better. That's about how to think content, how to think about the way that you're leading. The other thing that's different about this, the how-to versus the how to think, is that someone could disagree with you. It's hard to disagree with, here are 3 tips to improve your communication. It's much easier for someone to disagree with this idea that the way leaders communicate often reveals whether they actually trust the people they're leading. But I actually look for those things when I'm working with clients. What are the things that they've learned, they believe, they've observed, they put into practice themselves, where not everyone agrees with it? That's where the gold is. That's something that makes what you're talking about interesting and different, and also helps your audience learn something about themselves. So the diagnostic question for this second yes is, where am I staying neutral because I don't want to be criticized? Not where am I being thoughtful? Thoughtful is good. Nuance is good. The question is, where am I staying neutral because I don't want to be criticized or I don't want to stand out? One way to find this is to look at your talk and ask, could any competent person in my field say this? If the answer is yes to almost everything in the talk, then your expertise may be there, but your judgment may not be showing up enough yet. And by judgment, I mean what you believe matters most, what you think people are getting wrong, what you wish your industry would stop pretending is true. You know, those so-called best practices? Well, oftentimes those best practices work really well for a certain group of people, but not for everyone else. What do you want your audience to finally see? Those are the places where your point of view usually lives. And the cost of staying neutral is that the audience may not have anything to attach to you. They may agree with everything you said. They may think, oh, yes, that was useful. But if you didn't make a claim, if you didn't help them to see something differently, there may not be a sentence they remember later. And that's where then you don't get referred and then you don't get booked for other speaking engagements. The third thing you may be saying yes to is the wrong room. Or maybe more accurately, you're saying yes to a room in a way that keeps you in the expert identity. And I will say this, there are times where saying yes to a lot of rooms makes sense, especially when you're earlier in your speaking journey. You need to get the reps in. You need to get in front of audiences. You need to practice your material. You need to see what lands. You need to learn which rooms light you up and which rooms drain you. And I have absolutely done this. In the earlier years of speaking your brand, I needed to test out a lot of the content that I was putting together so I could see what resonated most with audiences. And I mostly presented in rooms of women entrepreneurs since that was my target market. This was about a year into my business, and I was invited to give a presentation to a group of entrepreneurs. So this was both men and women, and it was a small group. It was about 20 of them. And I knew going in that this was not quite my target market. And this group of entrepreneurs were not service-based. They were kind of manufacturing and industrial. So very, very different from the types of clients I had worked with so far. But I said yes anyways to doing that. Yes, because I wanted to get the reps in. Yes, because I wanted to test out the material. And yes, because I wanted to see what it was like to present to an audience that was not one that I was used to presenting to. And I'm so glad I said yes to that room. I didn't get any clients from it as I expected. My expectations were very aligned. But I got from that all the things that I was hoping. And I got an amazing testimonial from the gentleman who ran the group. And I still have that testimonial on the speaker page on my website. So definitely say yes at the times where it makes sense. But then at some point, you're going to have to get more selective, as I have done, because you have to start asking, is this room helping me become more known for the work I actually want to be known for? And that question matters because the expert trap can show up not only in the talk itself, but in the way we shape ourselves to fit the invitation. Someone asked you to speak on leadership and you said, yeah, sure, I can do that. Someone asked you to speak on confidence and you say, sure, I can do that. Someone asked you to give practical tips, and because you're good at what you do, you can probably give practical tips on a lot of things. But here's what can happen. The more general the room's request is, the easier it is for your message to get watered down. The title gets broader, the examples get more generic, the call to action gets less clear. The thing you actually believe gets softened because you're trying to make the talk fit the room. And underneath that, there can be another identity bargain. You say to yourself, well, they invited me, so I should be grateful. If this is the topic they asked for, I should just adapt it. If I make it too specific, they may not get it or they may not want me. And there are times when you will say yes because a relationship matters or because it's a good practice opportunity or because you want to support the organization, and that's fine. I just want you to be conscious of what kind of yes it is. Let me give you an example. About a year and a half ago, our lead speaking coach, Diane Diaz, was invited to give a talk at a women's business group here in Orlando, Florida, where we live. The program organizer for this group reached out to Diane because she had known Diane for a number of years and said, we're looking for a speaker to come and present to the group on LinkedIn strategies. And Diane, because of course she's been working with Speaking Your Brand for over 7 years and she's worked on hundreds of talks with our clients and gives amazing presentations herself, knew better than to say, sure, I'll present for 45 minutes at a luncheon while people are eating lunch on a topic of here's how to optimize your LinkedIn, or here's how to use LinkedIn better as a woman in corporate or a woman business owner. Because if you're at a luncheon, you're there you want to learn something, but you're eating lunch, you want to chat with the other people at your table. You're not there at a workshop. You're not there writing things down. You're not there with your laptop open, making changes to your LinkedIn profile. So Diane had a conversation with the woman who was directing the programming and said, yes, I can definitely include some information on LinkedIn, but I think would be of more interest to the women in the audience is more about personal branding, what personal branding looks like nowadays, how it may be different than how they used to think about it, how we all have a personal brand, whether we like one or not. And here are some ways that they can start thinking about the personal brand they've already built, because these are established women, but then what they want more of. So what other opportunities are they looking for, and how can they shape what they're doing, whether it's on LinkedIn or other places, to do that? And the programming director loved that. She loved that idea. Diane went and delivered that talk. I was there. It was so much fun. She had an incredible reception, and we got 3 new clients from the women who were in that group. Now, if Diane had just delivered here are 3 tips to optimize your LinkedIn profile, I don't think the audience would have reacted the same way, and you probably wouldn't have gotten new clients. So that's why I'm saying that you can say yes to something, but you can still adjust and direct what the topic is and what you're going to be presenting on, because oftentimes you have a better understanding of that than the event organizer is. Now, if someone comes to you and says, I want you to deliver a talk on LinkedIn strategies, it's probably not going to go over if you say, oh, well, no, instead, I would like to deliver a talk on 5 ways to get healthy. So, right, there's definitely a mismatch there. So you definitely have to kind of like stay in the same lane, but don't be afraid to offer your own ideas. So the diagnostic question for this third yes is, am I saying yes because this is a room where my thought leadership can grow, or because being invited makes me feel validated? And I know that can be hard because we all want to feel validated for our expertise, for our contributions, for where we've gotten in our career and in our business. But one of the hardest parts of moving from expert to thought leader is that you stop taking every invitation as evidence that you're allowed to speak. You start asking whether this is the conversation you're here to lead, whether this audience indeed is the one that is waiting to hear from you. Because the cost is that the wrong room can make you busy without making you known. You can speak a lot, you can get the practice, you can get nice feedback. But if every room asked you to become a more generic version of yourself, those talks may not compound. They may not lead to better fit invitations because the audience still doesn't know what to associate with you, what makes you different from other speakers. This is not about being too good for certain rooms or certain stages, not at all. It's about asking whether the room or the stage helps your thought leadership get clearer, or whether it pulls you back into being the broadly useful expert. Let's put this diagnostic together. This is the part I want you to think about, maybe even jot down as long as you're not driving right now. Pull up a talk you're working on, or a speaker proposal, or a workshop outline, or even the short answer you give when someone asks, what do you speak about? And then ask yourself these 3 questions. First, where am I using more content to prove that I belong, or to prove that I know what I'm talking about? Second, where am I staying neutral because I don't want to be criticized, or I want to make sure everyone is comfortable and agrees? Third, am I saying yes because this room or this stage helps my thought leadership grow, or because being invited makes me feel validated? And then I want you to add one more question. What is this costing me? Is it costing me memorability, referrals, better fit rooms, the chance to be known for the idea I actually care about? Those are the identity questions underneath the expert trap. Who am I trying to be in this talk? Am I trying to be the expert no one can question? Am I trying to be the good student who did all the homework and did all the preparation? Am I trying to be the safest person in the room? Or am I willing to be the thought leader? The one who says, here's what I believe, here's what I want you to see, here's what I understand about where you're at, where you want to go, and what's getting you stuck. Here's why this matters. And here's what I invite you to think about and do differently. This is an identity shift. And if this brings up imposter syndrome or feeling like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to be a thought leader, doesn't someone else have to call me a thought leader? No, they don't. You can use the term if you like it or you don't have to. But if you are feeling this a little bit of a sense of unease, it may mean that you're finally getting closer to the thing you actually want to be known for. Now, of course, you still want the claim to be grounded. You're not just picking stuff out of the sky. You should have expertise and evidence and research behind it. You want it to be defensible. You want it to come from your real work and your real observations. But don't confuse the discomfort of being visible with a sign that the idea is wrong. Sometimes it's just the discomfort of being known and being seen. But being known is what makes you bookable, not famous known, not performative known, but bookable in the sense that the right people know what conversation to invite you into. Now, here's what I want you to do with this. One action for you this week. Take one talk, one pitch, one workshop, one piece of content, and find one place where you're trying to prove that you're qualified. And replace that one proof sentence with one belief sentence. A proof sentence sounds like, I have 20 years of experience helping leaders communicate more effectively. A belief sentence sounds like this. Most leadership communication problems are actually trust problems. Do you hear the difference? One establishes credibility, which you should have, but you need the other one, which is the point of view. Because of when you heard me say, I have 20 years of experience helping leaders communicate more effectively, you probably in your mind were like, I've heard this before. But when I said most leadership communication problems are actually trust problems, did your ears perk up a little bit? Did you lean in? Were you curious? Did you want to hear more? That's the difference. Here's an example from me. A proof sentence of mine might be, I've worked with hundreds of women on their presentations and speaking skills. True, useful, credibility matters. But my belief sentence is, your audience doesn't need you to prove everything you know. They need you to help them see what you see. That's the thought leadership sentence. That's the kind of line that makes an organizer think, oh, that's the conversation we need. So don't throw out your proof. You need your proof. Your expertise matters. Your credentials matter. Your client experience matters. All of that matters. But I want you to start thinking about your beliefs, your points of view, your perspectives, what you've learned and observed that you can share with your audience. If this series has made you think, oh, I can see where I've been doing that, then that's good. That's what my hope has been. The expert trap is hard to see because it often looks like preparation and generosity and professionalism. It looks like being the person who really knows her stuff. And again, those are not bad things. But if you want your speaking to lead to more than polite feedback, if you want your ideas to be remembered and referred and booked, you need more than expertise. You need that point of view, a message people can repeat, and a willingness to be known for what you believe, not only appreciated for what you know. If you haven't yet taken the speaker archetype quiz, I invite you to do that. You can do that again at speakingyourbrand.com/quiz. And if you're interested in learning more about how we can work together, you can visit our website at speakingyourbrand.com. Our coaching programs are on there. And the best thing to do is to schedule a consultation call with us. We'll talk about your speaking and visibility goals, answer your questions, and see which program is the best fit for you. Until next time, thanks for listening.